How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another podcast. Before I get into the introduction of our guest today, I want to make a quick shout out to Angler. The not just any Angler, the ANGLR right here, the Angler Bullseye, who are known for their Angler app, the Angler Bullseye. Now have Angler compatible with rods and Lowrance units, which is pretty awesome. I am now working with Angler. I cannot wait to see what is in store for the future with them. But I want to make a quick shout out to them because they're supporting the podcast, supporting my YouTube channel, and I can't wait to keep moving forward. The Angler Bullseye is a great asset of mine because I'm very analytical with how I approach my fishing trips. I'm very analytical in my learning bass behavior, learning areas, patterns, trying to put things together in more of an analytical way than just based on a hunch. While gut feelings can be productive, stats don't lie. So I think that the angler, the bullseye, can help you with the application with this bullseye, help you fish better, fish more efficiently while on the water. And one thing that's pretty awesome that anglers come out with in their application now, while also being able to access our podcast on the application right there. Let's see if we can get that up there on the screen. You can also do challenges. So there are now challenges for Angler. There's the Vibe On Challenge, and there is the TRF Quarantine Classic. That one right there. Might be a little bit blurry, but you guys get the point. Download the Angler app if you haven't already. Join these challenges and get the opportunity to win. I think it's a $100 gift card to Vibe Kayaks, but also in the TRF Classic, you can win 3 free rods and free gear from Angler. Guys, you got to check them out. It's just an awesome way to make yourself better and more efficient out on the water. Hit me up in my social media or in these comments below in the video if you have any questions on them. It's a great way to access knowledge on this application between the podcasts, the articles, the videos, and the challenges are a great way to be competitive and also win some free gear and have some fun, especially this time that we live in with this whole virus. So I just want to make a quick shout out to Angler. Appreciate you guys for your support, and I cannot wait to make some videos using this bullseye moving forward and see what's to come. But today, getting back on track, what is important about today? We are with Mr. Hayes Baldwin, a Minnesota guide who is a multi-species guide, a tournament angler. He pretty much can catch anything that swims up there in Minnesota. I'm so excited to get this guy on and talk about many different things. We've been planning this out for probably, 2-3 months. This guy is always busy, always fishing. Fishing comes first for us anglers. So the fact that he got some downtime, took some time out of his day to sit down and have a podcast with me means the world. I'm super excited to get him on here. Hope you guys enjoy this as much as I do. Let's get to it. All right, we are recording. Hey, Baldwin, what's going on, my man?
Good. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. It's probably been, 2-3 months we've been trying to get this to happen?
Yeah. I think we started talking about this in late January, early February, but here we are. What is it? Almost the middle of April here, coming on beginning of April, but
yeah, especially the first week of April. Well, we finally got it done. I mean, it's not done yet, so we got to knock on wood. We got to make sure we get through this thing.
We'll get through it. We'll get through it.
How you doing up there? You staying safe? You staying healthy?
Yeah, man. They're good thing they allow us to fish. Otherwise, I'd be going mad up here. But yeah, everything's good, man. I actually work at a granite shop, so I still have my job. It's considered an essential business, so I'm still able to make money, which is cool. So yeah, it's good. I'm able to have a little cash flow. A lot of people are out of work, so that's got to be tough.
It is really tough. I was talking. I think you're friends with him, Adam Bartusik, and he's struggling now. And everybody, I just got laid off myself. It's a tough climate to be in. Hopefully, it blows over soon. But it is what it is. Got to keep on the grind. So
yeah, it's gonna change a lot of stuff. So we'll see what happens. I'm optimistic. So we'll see.
Yeah. One thing's for sure, the one thing I always think is kind of humorous, but my buddy said it's the extinction of the handshake. Pretty much is what's going on.
Yeah, we do. What is it with the elbow bump now?
That's what it is. A little elbow tap. Yeah.
Elbow about that? Yeah.
All right. Well, before we dive into the whole podcast, for everybody listening, watching, tell them a little bit about yourself, and then who got you into fishing and how that whole thing started.
Yeah. So my name's Hayes Baldwin, and originally I'm from the metro area of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So the western suburbs, right around Lake Minnetonka, is where I grew up. Fishing all those lakes out there, Lake Independence, Minnetonka, Sarah, to name a few. There's 10,000 lakes in Minnesota, so I could go on and on and on about that. But my great grandpa was kind of the one that introduced me to fishing. Other than him, no one in my family fished at all, actually.
Wow.
So I was able to spend time fishing with him at a young age until I was, he passed away when he was 104 years old. So he lived a long life. I was able to fish with him up until I was about 13 years old. And he definitely taught me a lot. Of course, he was mainly like a pan fisherman. He didn't do a whole lot of like bass fishing or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, he taught me how to clean fish and all that good stuff. And I hacked away at a lot of fish before I finally got to, learn it. But yeah, he's the only one in my life that really fished that was in my family. So yeah.
I love hearing the stories of guys that get into the sport, and it's not just because their whole entire family does it, so naturally they kind of are born into it.
Right.
It's cool to see, like, not the whole family does it. You kind of get into it in a different way. It's a unique story, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
104 is freaking impressive.
Yeah, he lived long. He instilled that fishing love for fishing in me, and then also something else is he was a real big golfer as well, and I played high school golf, and I actually still love to golf, and so so part of that was we'd fish, but we would also golf together, and so that's the other thing that he instilled in me at a young age was this love for golf, which I definitely still have. So that's kind of cool. But
he must have been like a health freak if he's golfing past 90.
Yeah, I think he had lost his license when he was like 96.
Oh my gosh.
So
crazy. So how did you guys get? I'll have to ask, but like, how did you guys get around to like lakes and golf courses if he didn't have his license?
Yeah, I mean, so like his son, so my grandpa, my dad's dad, would drive us around and stuff, and then we'd have to help him get down the stairs at Lake Independence there. My grandparents had a place. It was just kind of a process, but right up until the end, I mean, he was the last conversation that I had with him in his hospital bed was about the previous day of fishing that I had, which is kind of interesting. Literally the last thing that we talked about was fishing. So, I mean, that says it all. I mean, this guy loved it, and it's definitely lit a fire inside me that I can only see growing, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's incredible. It kind of gives you like it's your roots, something to to fall back on. Like when you have those frustrating days, those are the things you remember, and it kind of ignites you back into getting out of that frustration period and just going and catching them.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with the fishing industry, man. Like it's a small industry. It's tight, and if you're doubting yourself, it's everyone probably does at some point, but there's always an opportunity. You kind of just got to, put yourself out there and chase after what you want. And I mean, anything is achievable, man. So.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. So how did you continue your passion then? Obviously, once you didn't have him around to, share it with, how did you continue that until, I mean, I know we're going to get into whole bunch of stuff, but, what's the kind of timeline to where you are now? How does that work?
So, I basically was, fished. I had a good buddy of mine, Connor Kleist, that I grew up with, in late in middle school and then up into high school. He kept his boat at my grandma's dock on Lake Independence, so I would fish with him on and off. I would shore fish a lot, when I didn't have just got my driver's license. In the summertime, we actually had a cabin up north here where I currently live, in the Brainerd area on Gull Lake. So I was fortunate enough to spend my summers there as a kid. So I always was fishing. I think I've had like 6 or 7 different boats. I seemed like I got a new boat every year, but crappy lawns. We'd build decks on them and stuff, and it was nothing special. But and then I throughout this course of fishing and stuff, I met a couple of people. Interestingly enough, I met a guy named Bill Linder, whose uncle is pretty well known. His name's Al Linder, and I developed a relationship with Billy, and everything kind of took different routes. I don't know. That was kind of cool because just from that relationship, a lot of stuff stemmed out. I met a lot of people, and another guy I got to mention, Levi Christensen. I met him on Gull Lake when I was 15 years old, I would say. Randomly, he was fishing, and he asked me. He said, "This is a true story." He said, "Where can I catch some bass on the lake?" And I was just, a little kid. I had in a 12-foot crest liner, whatever, tootling along. I didn't really know what was going on, but I knew where to catch bass. And he said, "Where can I catch bass?" I said, "Follow me." I was just like, I can impress this guy. I was a young kid, and I said, "Just follow me over here and cast." I said, "Cast at that the edge of that dock over there." And it was a swimming dock that was out in the water, in like 8 or 9 foot of water, and he casted at it. And on his first cast, he caught like almost a 4-pounder. I think it was a 388. He was pre-fishing for a tournament. And so he was like, "Can I pick you up at your dock tomorrow morning? Can we go fishing?" And I was like, "I'm going to have to ask my parents." And, of course, my parents said, okay. We got together, and that relationship definitely blossomed. We fished a number of tournaments together in the coming years. And I have like 6 or 7 wins under my belt with Levi on Gull Lake. Some second place finishes. I also fished with his brother Chad. So man, it's just crazy. Just this random little stuff happens, and
Amazing.
yeah, I don't know, man. Just weird stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So you were breaking every rule of coronavirus. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, I was.
That's funny. Those are some of the greatest like stories though. You hear that the friendships that are built off of random stuff like that just kind of blossom into something where lifelong friends, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah,
that come randomly.
It's really something I don't take lightly, and it's something I believe that everyone experiences at some point or another in their lives, and these relationships can turn out to be really some of the most important relationships you can make, and so that's why I think it's really important for anyone listening to this, that to just kind of don't be afraid to ask questions, don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there, and if you really want something, go and try and get it. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, meeting random people, I'm all about it. Talking to random, I don't care. I mean, I had the opportunity to do a seminar, public speaking. I love it all, man. Anything fishing related, I'm addicted.
So that's why you wanted to be on the podcast.
No, you got something cool here. I mean, this is sweet. Well,
yeah, no, and it's another thing too is obviously don't do it now because like with the whole Corona thing, but take a kid fishing, like even if it's just picking up a kid at a boat ramp. I've heard so many stories of that where guys just see a kid fishing from the bank, he's by himself, be like, "Hey, your parents care if you come fishing," and then that's like those are some of the greatest stories you hear in fishing because a lot of those guys are some of the biggest names in the industry now because of people that do that, just who are willing to go out and put others in a position to catch fish, being selfless, which is pretty cool.
But, heck yeah, man.
Yeah. So where in that timeline did you decide, hey, I want to be a guide?
Yeah, I want to be a fishing guide. So it was always like I actually had won a guide trip when I was like 16 with one of Walleye Dan. He's a guide over here, one of his guides. And so I was able to go out with my buddies and we fished with him. And I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, this is what this guy, fishes in the summer. And this is how he, makes income and stuff. And so at the time I was still in high school and I was like, I think after high school, I better move back up to the Brainerd area and kind of pursue this fishing thing. And so I'm going to take a lot of turns and this is going to kind of go off, but I'll come back in.
It's perfect.
I worked at a place called Tuned Up Custom Rods, which we built custom fishing rods, specifically ice rods. They did do open water stuff too. And I met a guy named Pat Olson there who informed me that there was an available job up north at Glacier Fish Houses. That's ice houses. So immediately once I got out of high school, I moved up north. I was actually living at my cabin, my family cabin at the time, and I worked at Glacier Fish Houses and built these fish houses, on the side of trying to get the guiding thing going. And, I would say throughout the last 3 years, I've probably guided 200 times. So it's not like a massive thing for me, but I can count on it as a source of income, in the summertime, and then a little bit in the wintertime. I have a fish house as well of my own that I rent out to people. So the guiding thing developed, basically right out of high school when I was 18, 19. And I've developed a decent name for being, 22 years old. I have to compete against some of these guys that have been doing it for, there's some famous guides leagues up here, the Nisswa Guides League. These guys have been guided for 50 plus years, man. They have clientele and lists of people that'll fish with them. So I would say there's 50 other guides in the Brainerd area. So I'm still working on developing a bigger presence, but it's definitely cool to just be in the mix. And it's a daily thing, but I mean, with the whole coronavirus thing, I don't know what this summer is going to bring. I have 6 or 7 trips in the book already. And I usually, get more and more as the spring and summer wears on, but who knows what's going to happen. But I mean, yeah, that's basically how I got this thing started.
It's unfortunately it seems like it would make sense for guides to do well during this time, but with all the the distancing and everything, it sucks because there's no way around it. There's not. You see all these sport teams that can't compete anymore, but they're still getting good ratings because, I saw these 2 pro soccer teams. What they did is they couldn't have games anymore, so the 2 teams in the day they're supposed to play, they basically live streamed 2 of their players. So one of their players from each team played each other in FIFA using their teams, and that's how they determined who won.
Yeah.
So there's some creative ways, but as a guide, you can't do that. There's not things you can do. You can't tell somebody to go play a fishing video game and make it worth their time. It just doesn't translate. So it's tough, especially for that industry.
And without the coronavirus, even something that I should tell every single person out there, if they're wanting to get into guiding, there's pros and cons to it. But one of the things you have to prepare yourself for is financially. There's going to be times of the year where you're not able to necessarily make money. In Minnesota, that time is going to be from November 1st until maybe mid-December when the ice is starting to form, and you can't really do much on the lakes. And then again, like right now, when the ice is coming off the lakes, you can't do anything. There's no fishing really to be had anymore. So it's important to have different streams of income, whatever that may be. For myself, I still do a couple of things. I currently have, basically a full-time job. Until the summer starts rolling, I can take more time off. But definitely the more sources of income you have, the better off you're going to be from that aspect. Just because if you get hit with something breaks down on your boat, heck, my bait bill last summer had to be like close to $2,000 that I was spending just in bait. There's all these crazy things that pop up. And so the different streams of income is really, really critical in this industry, especially at the beginning.
Yeah. Any sort of hit of any size is going to put a wager in how you do things. So it's pretty difficult. But what's the goal here? What's your goal? Is guiding full-time a dream of yours?
Yeah.
What's the goal?
It's definitely a dream of mine. I like I like ice fishing. I feel like I'm kind of forced to do it. Obviously, I do enjoy it. I like open water fishing 10 times more. I want to spend my time from May 1st until the end of October, ultimately guiding, 100 to 200 trips, whatever it may be, somewhere in there a year. That's what I want to do. I want to make it, a living. And I realize that's going to take time. But the end goal is to kind of do that. And then, also I'd love to get into tournament fishing, both walleyes and bass. I mean, I love it both. I've spent time fishing for both, and I've developed a passion for basically all speed. Heck, I'll fish for anything that swims, man. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much that. So
let me ask you then. I've never experienced or read up on or watched a walleye tournament video. Is it anything like? Is it pretty much a bass tournament, just different species? How it's run, or how
yeah,
does?
so with walleyes, a lot of times there's a slot limit. So the tournaments around here where we're actually keeping fish, you have a 5 fish limit, just as you would in a bass tournament. And out of those 5 walleyes, you're only allowed 1 walleye over 20 inches. So your goal to get that 30-incher, 29, that 8-pounder, that's like your kicker. And then you want to get obviously 19 and 7/8 as your unders, although that's very rare to achieve that. But you want to get good unders. We talk about getting good unders and a good over. So your 5 fish limit can be as heavy as possible.
Oh, so everyone's keeping fish. You just have to. There's a strategy behind it, though.
Yep. And then also there's an AIM format, AIM Walleye Series. That's a big series in North Dakota and Minnesota up here, where you actually get a blank SD card, and you have a digital camera, and you're given a measuring board, and you actually put your fish down on the board and take a picture of it. And then you flip the fish around and take a picture of yourself holding it, the other side of the fish, to prove that it's the same fish. And then there's a pre-recorded weight for each link. So if I caught a walleye that weighed 19 inches, for example, I would look on my scorecard and it would say 19-inch walleye weighs, 2.5 pounds. And I would write down all the fish that I caught and take pictures of them. And at the end of the day, I would take my 5 biggest fish, and that would be my weight. That's something that they're doing more because walleyes are a species that are a little bit more fragile than a bass. And so from that aspect, I mean, it'd be interesting to see it. I'm not quite sure it would be as fair with bass fishing because, I mean, bass don't get to 30 inch. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
But it's kind of a cool format. So, I mean, that's the 2 different sides of walleye fishing tournaments around where we're at.
It's very interesting. It seems like I could be wrong here, so you can correct me if I am. That method of tournament fishing for those walleyes sounds like there's a lot of room for people to kind of, I guess, sort of cheat.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, it takes. I feel like it does take a special kind of person, to do something like cheat in a tournament. But there's definitely a lot more room with that AIM format, and you kind of question yourself. Sometimes you see weights that are unbelievable, unbelievably high, and it's always in the back of your mind, like, did someone cheat? But at the end of the day, you just got to trust that people are honest. And I mean, it's better off for the walleye fisheries, and as far as keeping fish, healthy and alive. From that standpoint, the AIM definitely does a better job with that.
It's good. It's very rare to see, I guess, coming from the bass world, to see a tournament trail that has an honor code to it, where guys do trust each other. Because a lot of these bass tournaments are very fine-tuned, down to the point where there is very little or no room for cheating.
Right.
And if you do, it's very obvious.
Right.
I see some local trails where I'm sure stuff goes on. My local trail around here, not to call out anybody, but like the same 3 guys that win all the time are the same 3 guys that are already on the lake and they don't get their live wells checked. Just my 2 cents. But
no,
different things like that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I totally hear you on that. We have local leagues around here and stuff, and I'm telling you what, man, like the same guys, win week after week, and you kind of start to scratch your head, and you're like, how are they producing these unbelievable bags of fish? And you just gotta, I don't know, you just gotta trust what you're doing, and I mean, it's out of your control, but. Yeah. I mean, it is mind blowing sometimes just to be like, just take a step back and say, like, how is this possible, man? These guys are sacking up 20 plus pounds every night or whatever it is for bass derbies. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's something you get to look into, but it's not something to dwell on at the same time. But
No.
if you were able to give a pro and a con, one for each of guiding, what would you say?
Man, I'm a pretty social person, so I could talk to someone for 2 hours about nothing, about mowing grass. And I have. This is weird, but one of the pros is, you get to know so many people. You're getting to spark new conversations with people. You're constantly talking. You're constantly teaching. I love to teach fishing. So my grandfather, one of the things that he instilled in me was this passion for fishing. He taught me. So when I'm able to take, let's just say, an 8-year-old kid out and they get to reel in a 4-pound largemouth bass, and I get it in the net, and I see the joy that it brings that person, I feel it inside of me, like that fire, that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So there's tons of pros. The cons of guiding, I guess just like, I know some guys that do it 200 times a summer, 200 times a year rather, in the open water season. That's a ton. So, one of the cons has to be, I don't know how every single day you could produce fish. So you are gonna have your bad days, on the water, but you just have to learn to, you got to learn to break down water, and when you're not guiding, I think it's important to be on the water still, and because if you're doing it that much 200 times a summer, for example, you gotta produce fish. And I'm saying, like, I think there's a point to where it gets a little bit feeling too much. It gets like to a point where you feel like this certain amount of pressure. That's just
almost like tournament fishing.
Yeah, that's just what I would guess. I don't know. Maybe some of these guys that have been doing it for 60 years, maybe they have their milk runs, and but yeah, it's just the cons would be like, you have to prepare mentally for bad days on the water, and that's a real thing. I've had them myself. The worst guide trip I've ever had was, I was in a boat with a guy for 6 hours, and I caught one smallmouth bass. That was it. That's all the boat saw. I caught one smallmouth bass myself, which really sucks. Sometimes I don't fish. If I'm fishing with one other person, I fish. Kind of depends on the people. If I have to, if they're not very highly skilled, then I'm constantly helping them and stuff, so I'm not fishing. But yeah, you're going to have bad days, so you just have to kind of mentally prepare for that stuff. But I think there's more pros than cons, definitely.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
If there were more cons than pros, you wouldn't be doing it. So.
Yeah, and I'm by no means a full-time, I don't do this every single day in the summer, but I can definitely see, how if you were, it would become kind of stressful, and you'd have to, you'd have this sort of feeling like you got to produce, daily, which I one day I wish to feel that, and I wish to see if I can achieve, the success of being a full-time guide, for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. A curious question I have for you.
Yeah.
As a guide and as an angler, you said you love to fish multi-species. You have a passion for each species that pretty much that swims.
Yeah.
What if you were to put it on a calendar, January to December, of species that you like to target, if you could say your favorite species, or maybe say the best species to target in each month, what would you put that as?
So we're coming into April and May. Until the walleye season opens, we're actually only able to fish for crappie. And so I love to crappie fish, even into May a little ways, before the fish get to spawning. But, this time before walleye opener, when the lakes open up, it's a great time to go out and chase panfish, And of course, you're going to have a lot of bycatches. You're going to be catching largemouth. You might catch walleyes. You'll catch stuff at the same time. Obviously, you can't keep them, and, you're not targeting them, but yeah. So I would say May through, late April through the end of May and stuff is a panfish. And then I kind of gear up, and, my most of my June through basically, through August is split 50-50 between bass and walleyes, man. So, and then, stemming from that comes my favorite bite of the year, which is in the fall, when the water turns over again and hits, the mid 50s. Again, the crappie bite is phenomenal in deep water. The largemouth are pushed back up shallow. The walleye bite can be phenomenal in deep water. You'll get big schools of bait fish that congregate, in 30 to 60 feet of water, and they're very easy to see on electronics, and you can fish for them. So I mean, and then through the ice, man, I consider myself more of a walleye fisherman than anything. I like to chase panfish when I have the opportunity to. But yeah, I mean, just there's a time and place for everything, but I mean, heck, you can catch everything anytime, right? I mean, I don't know.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, that's one thing that I've had a bunch of guys from the Minnesota area on this podcast, and that's one of the biggest topics that we talk about in comparison to New York is that you guys can't target species out of season, whereas we have like maybe 2 counties where you can't do that here, but they're very small, that you can't target bass. But like in counties where bass fishing is very prevalent, you can target them all year round. There's just only certain seasons where you're allowed to bring them home.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a huge decline of people keeping bass, which is, for me, as a tournament angler, a competitive fisherman, a guy that just does it for the love of the species and to learn, I love to see that. But it's tough because you guys can't even target anything, which is
this is kind of interesting too. I'm gonna touch on this. Typically, we're able to fish border water. So one of the river systems up north called the Rainy River. It runs from Rainy Lake into Lake of the Woods. It is actually, they close down all the accesses, so you're able actually still to fish out, I believe, until the 14th of April. And so that's a big pre-spawn walleye run that a lot of guys fish every year. And this year they're not able to do that, and so the amount of boats that's in that river on a daily basis, like last year at this time, on the river itself, I would guess, even on a weekday, there's 150 to 300 boats in that river. So that's quite a bit of boats. On the weekends, you're talking in the thousands, man. And so for good reason, they shut it down. But at the same time, I mean, that's a big deal for a lot of people, man. People go up there and fish sturgeon and walleyes this time of year. And now you're not really able to do that. Luckily, last weekend I was on Lake Superior, and we're able still to fish there and stuff. We fished for trout and with my buddy Grant, who's got that Superior Angling show. And so that was fun, but that's kind of the talk around Minnesota, is that whole Rainy River getting shut down has irritated a lot of walleye anglers. So that's kind of, that's where we're at here.
Interesting. So best fall fish, what would you say?
Best fall fish. I'm going to go with walleye off the bat, man. Like, I'd like to chase walleye. I mean, my favorite month of the year to fish, bar none, more than any other, is October, man. If I didn't have to do anything else but fish, October 1st through the 31st, that's what I would do. October is the number one month, and heck, the bass bite's good, the panfish bite is good, but the walleye bite in particular can be so good, man. I've had 30 to 50 fish days on my home lake, Gull Lake here in Brainerd. You just get big schools of fish. Like I said before, they're really easy to find. You drive around, drop a big minnow on their head, and you can put some, it almost feels like, in some cases like Canada. You're just popping them one after another. But favorite fall fish is definitely walleyes.
So when you go to look for walleye, when you're going out in the, are you, because there's a lot of guys that, when you go bass fishing, there's your guys that go and beat a bank and will go blindly and work a stretch I think is best. But then there's the guys that go offshore and they'll run their waypoints and then graph around to see if they see anything, and then fish certain, maybe it's rock piles, maybe it's brush piles. Are you going around to certain areas where they're usually at and graphing them until you find them, or are you just going to a certain area, a certain stretch, and hope that they're there?
So it's interesting because that there's a little bit of both. In the springtime, especially, a lot of your places that have current, like inflows, rivers, creeks, whatever it may be. A lot of times that's kind of just an automatic deal. If there's some current, a lot of fish are going to suck up into that stuff. So I'll blindly fish that. A lot of the times I'll just fish it because it produces year after year. But on the flip side, if you go out and you're looking at, say, like a large sand flat, for example, and so on this large sand flat, or rock flat, whatever it may be, I'm gonna use Mille Lacs Lake as an example. That's a lake in our backyard up here. You've probably heard of it yourself. A world-class smallmouth fishery, but a lot of the walleyes there early season are just kind of not. They just kind of roam. They don't hold on anything. So that's where the power of side imaging comes in. You can run down a break line and shoot your, off to the right 80 feet and the left 80 feet, looking for those shadows and stuff. And so a lot of times as a walleye fisherman, we spend a lot of time just driving around, and I've spent 8 hours just literally looking at my graph and not dropping a line, pre-fishing for a tournament. That's my way of pre-fishing. I mean, I will use a tank of gas before I drop a line because I'm looking for something very special, something very sweet, and that's a lot of fish in a small area. Once I know there's a lot of fish in a small area, depending on the time of year, in the spring it might be I might pitch jigs, I might, in some cases troll. Come summertime, I'm going to switch to more of a live bait presentation for walleyes. I'm going to look for them more on, weed edges, points, in some cases like sunken humps. And I'm looking for tight groups of them. One of my favorite ways to target them is with like a slip bobber and a leech. And I use a big egg weight above a swivel below the bobber and then a jig head below that. So the whole program drops really fast. So it's more like a power slip bobber presentation. So I can drive around. And if I mark walleyes, I can stop my boat and pitch that live bait back to those fish. Gets down on them quick. If I don't get bit within 30 seconds, I move on. And then into the fall, it's more of live bait presentations. Same kind of thing applies in deep water. I use a lot more down imaging and regular 2D sonar to find fish. But with walleyes, man, it's really one of those fish, and you could say the same for schooling largemouth. I mean, and the more fish you can find in a small area, the better off you're going to be.
100%.
So I mean, it's cool because I mean I'm seeing artificials come into play. Everyone thinks walleyes, they think night crawler or a minnow or whatever. So it's cool. I mean, to be on the forefront of this artificial push. A lot of my buddies use plastics and jigging wraps. There's a lot of these new techniques to trigger fish, and so it's just cool to play around with. One day they might want like a half ounce jig with a like a fluke style minnow on it. You're just snapping it hard in the summer when the water's warm. The next day they might not eat that and they might want a slip bobber with a leech or a crawler when they're more neutral, when they're not in a positive mood. But it's just a time of year thing. So I mean, in the spring it's pretty much a jig and minnow bite, crankbait bite, and then as the summer progresses, spinners, you can troll crankbaits again, faster. The water's warmer, the fish's metabolism is higher. And then into the fall, they get a little bit more lazy. You kind of go back to that live bait stuff. But I mean, overall, it's cool. Just going after walleyes because, man, they bite, just like a bass or anything really. They bite just a variety of different stuff. So it's just fun to play around with that. So.
Yeah, I think your tangent there really just went to show how much I only know about bass and nothing else. I think I've caught 3 or 4 bass, or not. Oh my gosh, that'd be really bad. 3 or 4 walleye in my entire life.
Yeah.
And 2 of them have already been in the season because they were in the same schools as the bass were.
Right.
Which is pretty interesting. Which came up and saw this big fat belly of a walleye, and it was like, okay, it's a lovely surprise. Like,
yeah,
never had this before.
And on the flip side, you talk about bass. You were just saying, there's a lot of visual stuff with largemouth where we're at up here. in the lakes, like I'm sure you spoke to Sam, Sobey, Adam, whatever, the lakes that they fish down in the cities, a lot of those lakes, there's a lot more, there can be a lot more rock and stuff. So where you're actually graphing to find fish. Where we're at up here, I still do graph, weed lines and stuff for bass, but a lot of it's visual in the fact that the water is really clear, and I know what I'm looking for with the weed growth and stuff. So a lot of times I don't even use the graph. I just kind of drive around till I maybe see a mat of milfoil or coontail that hits the surface. It's got some water underneath it, and then I fish like a peg craw tube, 1 ounce peg craw tube, or whatever it may be, a pit boss, whatever you want to throw, and you just pick. I'm more of when it comes to bass fishing, a lot more of a visual guy myself. But.
You sound like a guy from New York right now, because a lot of our Finger Lakes are just big bowls of grass, and there's rock piles here and there, but there is no structure whatsoever.
No. You're just not gonna graph largemouth in dense weeds. It's just not a thing. So it becomes just a game of, if it looks good, you should probably fish it and learn from what you see. Learn from what you're seeing, and if you're catching fish on something in a particular lake, it probably works in other places as well. And I mean, that's just, I'm sure your water out in New York is really clear as well as ours is here. I mean, you have those staying lakes and stuff, but like that Cayuga, I'm sure you fish Cayuga. I mean, from what I understand, that's, there's a lot of visual stuff going on with that.
Yeah. I mean, this time of year, this past weekend was just offshore rock piles, and for those fish, in general, I don't like a super clear water. I like a little bit of stain, just because it likes to bite a lot better. Yeah. They're not they're not seeing as much. They're not seeing as clearly, so they're more susceptible to commit, which is pretty nice. But once it gets into like July, obviously all of our lakes have offshore rock piles. It's a matter of taking the time to try and find them, and once you find them, they're fire all year round typically. Right. But also, in that same retrospect, if you're trying to fish shallow, everything is visual once it comes to the grass. You actually you can graph, the deep weed lines, but that's going to be it. You're mostly what you're doing is you're finding something that sets apart from the rest of the lake, and you're gonna, if anything's healthy in a healthy environment and you're fishing the conditions right, you're gonna catch them. But if you can find certain things like cuts in the grass, points in the grass,
hard bottom,
to the grass, those are where the bigger density of fish are going to be. Yeah. So that's one thing that we look for, and I'm sure you do just as well in Minnesota as in New York, when it's very visual, like you said. But the deep grass lines, that's probably one things we do graph for. That kind of sets things apart from every other guy that might be out in that lake just flipping everything. Everything there is, every dock and every freaking
Some and over time you learn, some things are better than others, but for me, it's just trial and error. And it's why I actually, man, if I had to pick, I would fish bass every day. I like it more. I like to catch bass more than I like to catch walleyes. But the walleye are the money fish up here, man. That's what people want. And so I've learned to fish for them. But it's just more reward. It's more of a reward to me to be able to kind of like visually look at something and then catch a fish out of it versus driving around all day long. And, walleye fishing can get really, really boring and dull at certain times. And so, it's just you're fishing 65-pound braid with a 1 ounce weight, and a largemouth smacks your jig in a mat, a grass mat. In my opinion, like that's a lot more fun than dragging around a night crawler. And, a perch is tapping at it, and you might not catch a walleye all day long. That's the reality. And so bass definitely have my heart before walleye.
Nice. Yeah, 100%. Bass have always had my heart. They always will. There's really no other species that will take me away from bass, unless it's ice fishing, which I only got into this year, and I only went for bass. So it's one of those things, like, if I go after anything else, all my brain is thinking about is what the bass are doing at that point in time. Right, and then it just completely distracts myself, and I'm not efficient whatsoever. Yeah. It's just, it's a blessing and a curse.
I hear you, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing you brought up that you want to talk about, and we talked about a little bit with the walleye tournaments and stuff, and how you fished some bass tournaments on your lakes, and
Yep.
but looking forward to 2020, virus willing, what do you have planned?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm anticipating that the guiding season isn't going to be quite as busy as prior years, so I was kind of thinking I'd try to fish some more tournaments, and a lot of these tournaments you can pay in the night before or whatever it may be. There seems to always be spots, and so my goal was to try to fish like a dozen tournaments, considering I'll probably be working 4 days a week. At my granite job here in town, was to be able to fish more tournaments, but who knows what's going to happen with that, with the virus. But I think that on a typical season, I usually fish like 4 to 8 bigger tournaments, and then of course we have Thursday Night Bass League. You probably have a league yourself that you fish, on a certain night. But yeah, that's kind of the game plan, was for me to fish more. But who knows, man? Right now they canceled. I believe they canceled all the tournaments in May in North Dakota. So I don't know if Minnesota's next or what, but there's a couple bigger tournaments in May that I definitely wanted to fish. Those are walleye tournaments. And then we have a big deal up here called Classic Bass. I wanted to try to get into one of those Classic Bass deals and try to fish. It's $1,000 entry. Try to fish against some of these guys that are really, really big time with I have a tiller. They all have bass boats. I have a tiller boat to come in there and fish with the tiller, and try to give them a run for their money. But
Hey man, don't discredit the boat. That's one of the biggest things, dude. I'll always live by that. My buddy and I, our first tournament ever. We're in his oh crap, what the heck was it? Mastercraft or something, I think.
yeah.
I'm trying to remember. It was a very, I think it was a 25 horse he had on there. So everybody's run. It was like a 10. I think it's a 10 mile, 12 mile lake, something like that. But so very small lake. Okay.
Yeah.
And the guys make runs that takes them 5 minutes, if that. Takes us 15, 20.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to our first tournament we've ever been in. First tournament ever. 40, 50 boats, and guys that we know from the area are teasing us because we're going out in this small little tin boat, and basically this is how naive we were to tournament fishing. Was in practice we're like, we put up 20 pounds in practice, and we were catching a crap ton of fish, things you're not supposed to do when you're practicing. And we go out and we have maybe 13 pounds in our spots, and we're like, thunderstorms rolling in, we're like, dude, like, whatever, like, we suck. And we go to our last area, and we finally like sit down and think, like, we put the intimidation aside of all these nice rangers and these guys with graphs and everything, and super nice $500, $600 setups, and we still had some of our $60 Bass Pro Shop setups, and we're just like, let's get back to basics. And dude, I tell you, I kid you not, it just clicked, and we're just 5-pounder, 4-pounder, 5-pounder. We come back in with 22 pounds, and we win the thing by over a pound, and it's the plaque sitting actually right here.
There you go.
And, all of our guys they're like, you guys won it. And we're like, yeah, that's what you get for making fun of us. That's why you only caught 10 pounds today. Don't count out the little guy. But that still goes to show, it doesn't matter what boat you got, you can still win. It's all about the angler.
Yeah, and I mean, it's it's kind of, there's a thing with bass fishing, especially, I think, like, everyone's got a bass boat or some sort of flat bottom style boat, and I think guys need to start, coming in with something different. I mean, you can see it on the Elite Series, like Gussie Gustafson from Canada. He runs a Lund Pro V bass boat, and I mean, Lund is by no way, shape, or form a company that makes a bass. They never really made a bass boat. This is kind of their first one, so it's cool to see that. I run a Lund tiller myself, but I'd like to see more of a push. I'm a big tiller guy. I think it's the walleye side of me. There's just a lot more control. Everything's right there with the tiller. But I'd love to see, like you said, I mean, people shouldn't be afraid to just kind of go at it with whatever they got. But
well, isn't it, in bigger water? Isn't it better in bigger water too? Anyway.
Yeah. A bass boat will get swamped, and I won't. Because a bass boat will hit waves, and my boat can take a lot rougher water. It's a 20-foot Alaskan Lund, and so it's pretty deep. And I've had it in some pretty scary stuff, man. I mean, I've been in some stuff that I don't ever want to be in again. But I think if I was in a bass boat in that same light, it wouldn't have been looking good. So,
well, in retrospect, though, it like those experiences built you as an angler and as a boater, so you're more prepared for situations in the future. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, and it kind of, for living in Minnesota, man, like having a bass boat's cool and all, but I mean, if you're a multi-species angler, it's not the boat for you, man, because you're gonna get yourself in situations, on Mille Lacs or Vermilion, whatever these big wind-swept lakes are, and you're gonna want a bigger, fiberglass or aluminum boat. And I mean, if you're you're a multi-species angler in Minnesota, that's going to be, bigger Rangers, bigger lawns. I mean, on Lake of the Woods, heck, they run they run charter boats because, for customers out of the resorts there, I mean, that hold, 8-10 guys. I mean, having a big boat is good. Just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm comfortable with the tiller, and that may change. I might get a steering wheel boat, but it'll probably always be, a deep V boat. I'd love to own a bass boat. I'd love to own like 4 boats. Maybe I will one day, but I mean, up here, I'm a tiller guy for now, but we'll see what happens.
Nice. So I talked about tournaments for 2020, but just plans in general, virus willing, what you got planned, what you got in store, what would you like to do in 2020?
Oh man, I'd like to continue to try to grow, grow my guiding and try to, take as many guide trips as possible, fish as many tournaments as they allow me to. And then, grow a stronger social media presence, man. I mean, that is like the big thing these days, right? And so, doing stuff like this, me collabing with you, I mean, this is what it's all about. And this is what people need to do more of, this is a technology-driven age that we live in, man, and it's right at our fingertips, right? And so stuff like this it's easy to connect, it's easy to communicate, and so I mean, it's stuff like this that I want to do a lot more of.
It's awesome. That's good to hear. Yeah, and that's one thing I actually had on I had a recent podcast that we talked about, social media and how imperative it is becoming. You see a lot of these. We took some Elite Series anglers, for instance, these older guys that have been in the game for a long time. We'll talk about Rick Clunn. He just recently created an Instagram account because he's realizing that's becoming imperative for sponsorship deals, for advertising.
Shaw Grigsby in the same light. Yeah,
100%. These more traditional guys that are anglers are big names in the sport, but they're realizing they got to keep up with the young guys. I put into comparison. You got an old guy who's a big name in the sport, but you got a young gun who not many people know about, but he has a huge Instagram following. Yeah. As a sponsor, a company, it's a brand that you're trying to get into a market, you're going to go after him more than a guy who's just a big name because the guy can advertise a lot more for you than just a big name, He's got personal selling on the side, but this guy's got a bigger fan base, bigger social media presence where a lot of this purchasing is being done, which is pretty. It's an interesting market.
It's really interesting, and I think everyone should look into it. I mean, and it's like, our generation is a lot more in touch with it, but I think in the future you're going to see these guys, like these Elite Series guys or whatever. I mean, they're going to get a lot more in touch with it because I mean it's kind of the way that you get noticed nowadays and stuff. I mean, it's the way that you can kind of build a following, and that's where I like, what the YouTubers are doing. I mean, that's sweet, man. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it's like they're able to kind of, show fishing in a little bit of their own creative way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's something that I wish to get into, and something I'm definitely going to get into in the next, year or two.
Sweet.
Is as far as the route I'm going to take personally, I'm going to take more of an educational approach to it.
Awesome.
Versus like a vlog. I might do a little bit of that type of stuff, but I'm going to be a little bit more, what would you call it? Like, I don't know the word, like
right here, like Benjamin Nowak, where he's very educational and how teaching people techniques and stuff like that.
yeah, and a guy who walleye fishes up here that I watch a lot. His name's Tom Boley.
Okay.
If you check out Tom Boley fishing, I mean, he's got really, really good videos that are super informative about walleye fishing, and through the ice, crappies, smallmouth, stuff like that, where, he's showing a lot of how to read a graph, what kind of baits to throw. And for me, that's the kind of stuff that I personally love to watch because I like to soak in information. You know what I mean? And, not that what some of these vloggers are doing isn't cool. It's just kind of a different way to approach it and stuff. But I mean, if I were to get into it, I would definitely take that more of an educational approach. I'd mix some of that vlog stuff in there as well. But yeah, it's awesome to go onto YouTube, and you could watch fishing videos all night long, and it never ends, man. It's sweet.
So saturated, yeah.
Yeah, it never ends. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Well, you got a subscriber here if you decide to make one. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah.
I hope you do. But so we're gonna wrap it up here in a second. I got 2 questions that I like to ask at the end of each podcast. But before we do, where can people follow you on social media and keep up with you?
Yeah, so it's at Hays_Baldwin on or is it Hays dot? I'm sorry, HAYS.Baldwin BALDWIN on Instagram, Hays Baldwin on Facebook, and then my guide service and links and stuff are in the Instagram description. And I mean, that's pretty much, I'm working on building a new website, so I'm going to get that going here. The one I have right now is kind of half-assed, you would call it, I guess. But yeah, I'm going to be working on that, but definitely going to try to grow the Instagram a little bit, and eventually try to maybe get the YouTube going. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I gotta learn how to edit and all that fancy stuff, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But yeah, heck nice. Yeah, man.
We'll have all those links over here, and we'll link them down below for everybody watching, everybody listening, so they can go follow along. And if they're in the area or heading up there, they can book a trip with you. Sweet, and dude, just talk to your boy Sobe over there. He's an editing wizard. He can get you on that train.
Yeah, I got my boy Murray up in my boy Fishing More Outdoors up in Motley.
Yeah, for him. His channel's been popping off too.
I'm actually gonna say this right now on this podcast, and you're probably not gonna hear it anywhere else. I'm actually moving in with Murray into his house at the end of the month, and so I'm gonna be living with him, and it's gonna be cool, man. He's gonna hopefully show me the ropes of YouTube and stuff, and so I can get a better grasp on it. But I would expect to see a lot from me and him in the future. But again, shout out to Sam Sobe and Brock Outdoors, B-Rock Outdoors, all those boys that are doing it up. I definitely support them big time, and I want to get into it myself. But yeah, I mean it's awesome. So
I think you were in the episode with Murray and Sobe when they did there was a huge ice fishing tournament when they did interviews.
Yeah,
I don't think I've laughed harder during a YouTube video than I did on that one. That was
the boys had a few beverages that day. Yeah, they had a couple drinks.
It was pretty enjoyable for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good one. But cool, man. So are you ready for these questions, these last 2 questions that I ask everybody? I don't know if you're familiar with them. So.
I haven't. No, I'm not familiar with them. So I mean, I can only assume. I don't know what they're going to be. I guess I don't know.
They're either you'll get them right off the bat, or you're going to get stumped, and it's going to take you a while to get an answer.
Interesting.
Yeah, the guys that usually get them are the ones who watch every episode through and through. But it's
wowza! I'm doing it.
All right, let's see. So first question. This is definitely the tougher of the 2. Is if you could invite any 3 people to dinner to pick their brain, whether they're past or present, who would you invite and why?
To pick their brain.
Pick their brain.
Anyone to invite to dinner.
Anyone. Who would you want to invite to dinner? Have a steak and a beer to pick their brain and learn, just be able to ask them anything and get their full, truthful response.
Wow. I mean, is this just a personal? I just have to answer like what?
Yeah, like it could be anything. It doesn't have to be fishing. You could do it like any childhood hero. A lot of people have done family members they've never met because they were too young. Stuff like that.
Oh man, holy
Anything.
cow!
I think the popular answers, which I'm going to name so you can't pick them anymore, are going to be they're Teddy Roosevelt, KVD, and then Trump. Those are the most popular three.
Okay, I would not invite Trump to dinner. I'll tell you that much. No offense, but I wouldn't want to go to dinner with him. But let's see.
He'll make you pay the bill.
Yeah, he would make me pay the bill. Absolutely. I better get my $1,200 from him too. I guess we're all getting $1,200, right? But no, we don't. That's the other thing. Politics is not something to talk about at all. Really, not a good thing. Not a good thing to talk about on the social medias or anything. You kind of put yourself in a bad position there. But oh gosh, who would it be? Oh man, Arnold Palmer is the first person I'm going to name. Arnold Palmer.
Nice.
So you guys would probably know him from the tea drink, of course. I would pick to talk to him about golf in the early days. I think that'd be really kind of interesting to see how he was on the forefront of professional golf. And my grandfather actually caddied for him in the 1955 St. Paul Open, which is kind of weird. My grandpa in the cities, my dad's dad was a golf pro down at a place called Lafayette Club, so he actually caddied for Arnold Palmer. But I always thought he was a really interesting guy, and I never had the chance to meet him. So I would he'd be number one for me. Arnold Palmer would be number one.
It's the first time I ever gotten Arnold Palmer before.
Arnold Palmer. Number two. Oh man, number two. I gotta go fishing related. Wow. I'm gonna go with the guy no one will probably really know on here, but it's a guy by the name of Harry Van Dorn. Now, this was a guy in this area that I live in that guided in the 60s and 70s and stuff. He was a fishing guide for the Nisswa Guides League, and he was always kind of renowned as this guy to always produce fish. When other guys wouldn't, he would bring in stringers of fish. He had a good relationship with some of the guys that I work with now over at Linder Media. He had a good relationship with Al and his brother Ron. And he just was really kind of an interesting guy. And I read about him and some of the things that these guys say about him. It really makes me kind of want to meet the guy in person. But Harry Van Dorn, that would be the second one. So he was a Nisswa guide back in the day. A fishing guide. Number three. Oh man, number three.
Tough.
This is tough, man. This is tough. There's so many people. There's 7 billion people in the world, right? I mean,
you only got to pick three.
I only got to pick three. Oh man. Oh, not a politician. I know that. Oh gosh, man.
Childhood hero. Somebody looked up to growing up.
Oh gosh, man. I'm gonna bring it back to fishing again. Unfortunately,
Fortunately,
fortunately for everyone listening, it's gonna be another fisherman, a golfer and 2 fishermen. But definitely Roland Martin. I've never met Roland Martin, but I used to watch his TV show growing up. Roland Martin. I think he'd be a cool guy to go to dinner with. I think I might have met him when I was real young. It might have been a number of years ago, but he would be a guy. I mean, he spent a lot of time obviously down there in Florida, bass fishing. He was started kind of that Martin name that has definitely resonated. I mean, his son is probably one of the best fishermen on the FLW tour, if not the best. Roland Martin would be the third person that I would pick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I have two. I mean, it's not one. The first one's not really a story, but I remember watching this show all the time. Get up. My morning routine is to get up early to watch it on TV.
Yeah.
Breakfast is always 2 peanut butter sandwiches and a glass of milk, and then go back to bed after it was over. But dude, I went down to the Classic this year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm working the Classic. I was working for Douglas, and across from us was the P line booth.
Yep.
So naturally, Scott Martin had to go work the P line booth for a little bit.
Yep.
And I'm standing over there, and I was talking to Billy. I don't know if you watch Scott Martin's channel at all.
Yeah.
And Billy got a bass. He was standing over there while there's a huge line for Scott and everything, and I'm just talking to Billy about random stuff. And Roland came up and was talking to Billy. I introduced myself, and no one was walking over to Roland. And I was talking to Roland about just a bunch of stuff and like asking how he is and seeing how the family's doing, whatever. And he just looks at me, and goes, "Look at this guy, he's your own kid, and he steals all your thunder." And he's just making all these jokes, and there's this little kid waiting in line for Scott, and I asked him, "Hey, buddy, do you know who this guy is?" And he goes, "Sorry, sir, no, I don't know who you are." And look at Roland, I'm like, "Sorry, dude." He goes, "Damn kids, man."
Oh man.
The funniest thing. And then I was like, "This is Roland Martin," and the kid's like,
"Yeah,
like, I heard about you," and I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah, I think it. It's just like I'm a fishing history kind of geek guy with Minnesota related stuff, but I mean, I know like in the case of the Martins, obviously there's probably a bunch of people that don't know who Roland Martin is, but I think it's important to kind of learn that how things develop, I guess you would say, from the beginning to where we are now. I think you can learn a lot from the past. There's a lot to take out of some of the older stuff, especially in the fishing industry, man. Like it was so different back then compared to what it is today. It's like I don't know, it's like two different worlds, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is cool to see how different things start, and like I love listening to stories of how I met a lot of people at the Classic, and I would hear stories at dinner or when we went out to the bar after of how certain baits were created and how they became what they are now. And those stories are freaking cool about just like how the A-rig was born, different stuff like that, and how the madness, like people dropping hundreds of dollars on one A-rig because that was the thing that was catching all the fish at that time. So it's cool to see how different things start. Different things like that. It's pretty cool. But
it's awesome, yeah.
So last question, I'd like to wrap up the podcast this way. It's simple. Favorite fishing memory?
Favorite fishing memory? Oh wow. Oh, dude. You gotta give me a minute on this one. Holy cow.
Right, first thing that comes to mind.
First thing that comes to mind. Oh wow. Man, it's gonna be my favorite fishing memory is gonna be my favorite fishing memory is gonna be on the dock with my grandfather. When it was, because I fished with him multiple times, when it was, I don't know, but this is what I remember from it, because I was real young. I had to be like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
I had a little bobber and a little tube jig, like fishing for crappies, and I caught, I was fishing on this dock, and we had a pontoon in the dock, and I was fishing between the pontoon and the dock, and I hooked a walleye, a 16-inch walleye, and I got it up on the dock, and my grandpa, I remember my great grandpa, he said, "Throw it in the bucket, we're going to eat it." And I pleaded him, I don't know why, but I pleaded him that we throw it back. And then I started crying. And like, I have no idea why I was crying about it, but of course he let me throw it back. And nowadays, if I caught a 16-inch walleye, it's definitely going in the live well. I'm going to eat it for dinner. But that's just a weird one, dude. And I think of it a lot. It's just kind of like, I don't know what had gotten into me, but I mean, that's probably one of my favorite fishing memories. Weirdly enough, yeah.
I think it's just another testament to show that while we like to keep some of the species we catch, we also still have an appreciation for them.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Well, dude, I gotta say thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know this has been a long time coming, but I'm glad we finally got, we made it happen. So I'm glad and I'm appreciative that you took the time to hop on here with me, and it was a blast.
Yeah, and thank you, man, and definitely keep doing it and stuff, and I'll keep listening and but yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and
Of course.
I hope you can continue to grow, and maybe we run into each other, someday in the future. So yeah.
100%. I gotta get over to Minnesota and fish a couple of lakes, and I definitely
Yep.
want to do a because I've had I would say 10 to 12% of the people I've had on this podcast are all from Minnesota. So I've
Yeah.
been tempted to do just a Minnesota only podcast where I have a bunch of you guys on. It'd be just kind of funny to do and talk about different stuff, but
Oh,
um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So again, I appreciate having you on, and hopefully we'll have you on down the road once this is all over, and maybe
Oh
get a
yeah.
couple tournaments under your belt and see how we're doing. And
Yeah, absolutely, man.
100%, you stay healthy, stay safe, and looking forward to seeing you in a bunch of merge videos coming up here soon.
Oh yeah. Stay tuned. So.
All right, man. You take care.
Yep. We'll see you later.
All right, bye. All right, so that was a blast having Hayes on the podcast. Like we mentioned in the podcast, it's been a long time that we've been working to get this to happen, to schedule this and actually make it happen because we're both so busy. And he obviously has a lot on his plate, so it's tough to get this to both be on the same grounds and to obviously get here and do it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a blast for me to talk to him and learn about a bunch of different things when it comes to fishing in Minnesota, to guiding, to walleye tournaments, which I didn't even realize was a thing. I mean, I had a faint knowledge, but he dropped a lot of knowledge on me and you guys, so that was pretty awesome. Hope you guys appreciated it. We've been doing a little bit more of a multi-species thing on the podcast lately. Having Ben Schultes on here talking about trout and steelhead, salmon, and now Hayes on here talking about practically every fish under the sun, which is pretty awesome. It's not always going to be like this. Obviously, I'm very bass-hearted. I'm very bass-central to my... You guys get the point. I love bass. So we talked about a bunch of bass tonight with Hayes, but we also learned a bunch about new species, which is always a plus. I love talking fishing. It's the next best thing to fishing. So if you guys aren't already, go down below in the description. Go check out Hayes' social media, his guide page. Give him a follow along his adventures. He's a great dude. And hopefully he gets that YouTube going. And if you guys aren't already, subscribe to the Ogbre Outdoors YouTube channel. And you can find this podcast on the Angler app, hence the bullseye that we talked about in our intro to this podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Anchor app, pretty much any podcast application if you do not want to watch on YouTube. Thank you guys again for watching and for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.